Hello, everyone. This is Steve Bennett of the Bennett Collection. My guest today is Ann Tanksley. Ann is a wonderful artist, painter, illustrator, and she's with us today and discussing her work. And we have just completed discussion about social and political commentary in her work. And now we're moving on to her thoughts about the depiction of motherhood and mothering. Anne, talk to us about this painting. I think this is called The Vessel.
This is The Vessel. It's part of a series that I did from the play Wandarian, and it speaks directly about mothering, the role that the mother has in protecting her child, nurturing them, having helped them to grow. And as a mother, I have two daughters. This has certainly been a large part of my life. I think once a mother, you're always a mother. And it just goes on and on. I'm very proud to be a mother. I've loved working with children. I do believe that every child is given a gift. Sometimes they have passions that they're not able to realize or work to have them evolve. And those are the children that we have to nurture and help them realize the gift that they have. Unfortunately, this does not always happen.
Oh, indeed. So I'm interested in the compositional elements in this painting. What can you tell us about it? It's a fascinating composition. How did you come to it?
Well, it actually represents a vessel in which the child is born, conceived and born, and then eventually they come out into the world and they develop and grow, hopefully. I use the term motherhood and mothering quite a bit, although I don't know if it's absolutely gender specific, because there are men also who have the same quality. There are teachers, there are people who have never given birth to children, but they have this very special quality of wanting to help develop the mind and the body of a young child.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
an idea, or an idea.
Oh, it's true. Birthing. So these are more of your paintings on the mothering theme. Talk about these, please.
The first piece, The Need to Nurture, was also from the play Wandarian. And it's a woman who finds a dog and a little animal who needs love and help. And the breast represent one means of giving them sustenance and direction and help and love. The other picture is called Loving Mother. And it's about the love and the warmth and care that a mother gives. And as I said before, this is not gender specific, because certainly fathers are there also who give that same warmth and love to a child.
Speaking to the nurturance painting, does that have any sociocultural things informing it? Oh, I see this woman, she appears to have flowers strapped to her back. Did you see a scene like that in your travels? How did you come by it?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I believe in genetic memory. And there are certain things that happened in my life that I seem to have been aware of, even though I haven't experienced them. I am one of 3 siblings. I had a brother who died from childbirth. And this comes into play in my work, you know, and I don't know how, but I do know that my mother lost my brother at childbirth, and I can't imagine what she went through. I know it must have been a horrible experience, and I know of other people who have lost their child. And there's this deep need of motherhood that eventually my mother was able to have 3 other children, and she was able to address all of her needs. But
it's a very, the loss of a child at any point is a very devastating thing for a parent, certainly for a mother particularly.
Absolutely.
These 2 paintings are very stylistically different and compositionally different. Can you talk about that for a minute? What drives you? What characterizes the difference?
Well, I don't know if I can speak about these particular paintings, but I know that I'm back to painting. And I look at my work and try to analyze it and understand how different it is. The new pieces that I'm doing are very strongly structured, and I attribute it to the time in my life and what I am going through personally now. In this 3rd tier or 3rd phase that I'm in, I have to be more structured. I have to be more realistic, more pragmatic, more just constantly being aware of things that I have to do from hour to hour, from day to day. And I think it has played a part in the new pieces of work that I'm doing now.
So, do you feel like the time is more precious and has to be used a little more ruthlessly or more efficiently?
I think everything in life at this particular time with the COVID and just so many things, climate change is something that I am deeply aware of. I love to garden. And over the last couple of years, I've noticed quite a difference in my soil. It's drying out. It doesn't have the same feel to it. It takes more time for me to help those plants to grow. I know the water level has dropped in our area. Just everything about climate has changed, and I'm so happy now that they're addressing it. They're able to address it. There's a song that I like very much, and it's called "Everything Must Change." Time and everything changes, and that's true. There is some truth to it. However, everything revolves, and sometimes we find ourselves back in the same situation and wondering, are we going to move ahead? The 2 paintings that you have on the screen now, they were at a time in my life where everything was more fluid and more flowing and you know, more hopeful. These past years have just been very stressful. So I guess that's one of the reasons why structure has become more important to me.
Yes, I think the past years have become more stressful for all of us. I don't think, certainly you're not alone in that regard. It's a difficult time to be alive. And on the subject of mothering, you've made many comments. I'm interested in these 2 paintings, which are also part of the discussion around mothering. I'm pleased to say that Smothering Mother is in the Bennett collection. It was previously in the collection of Ebony and Jet Magazine Publishing Company, the Johnson Publishing Company. Talk about these works, please.
Well, I would like to begin by saying I'm always happy to find who has purchased my work. And it's like being able to see my children again, or one of my children. And when I found out that Smothering Mother was being auctioned at the Swan Gallery, I just had to go and see it. And it was just a wonderful feeling connecting with this creation. And in terms of the title, Smothering Mother, it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have a negative connotation. Some mothers smother because that's just a part of their nature. It can be advantageous or it can be destructive. But it's something that mothers do, and especially mothers with male children, I have found have a special connection to their male sons. Has nothing to do with them not loving their daughters, and sometimes it's vice versa. But I know my mother was particularly close to my brother, and when he went off to the service, it was a very difficult time for her. Did not mean that she didn't take care of us, love us, but that male son was really special.
It's kind of that opposite sex parent idea, isn't it? Fathers and daughters and mothers and sons, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in this case, again, I'm using animals. I didn't realize the title of this piece is Tigers and Tamers. I did not make the animals. They don't look like tigers. The tamer, of course, is the ring master.
Sure.
But you see a mother nurturing a child inside this cage, and onlookers wondering how this whole scene is going to develop. Again, another piece from Julie Tamer's Wandarian.
Yeah, the eyes of the observers on the back side of the cage are full of angst. It would seem.
Right.
They seem quite concerned for the well-being of the little person in the cage, right?
And you can't see the eyes of the tamer, but his eyes are also concerned as to whether the tiger's coming after him or just how this is all going to play out.
So those tigers have some symbolic meaning that is quite significant, I would think.
I think everything I do has a symbolic meaning. I remember as a little girl, when I was in kindergarten, they brought a cow to the playground, and all the children were allowed to help milk the cow. Then we took the milk into the kindergarten class, sat in a circle, and with a jar, shook the milk to make butter. This had a profound effect on me. And when I went to Africa, there was the cow just in such a holy, reverent, regal, powerful position. And I connected the two and I said, this happened here and this happened there, but somehow everything comes together.
Indeed, indeed. Well, beyond the subject of mothering, you've talked frequently about survival and release, and you have depicted some fairly gritty, what I would call as gritty real life scenes, and you've been a keen observer of human nature. I'm very interested in these paintings. Let's talk about the honeys, if we could.
I grew up in a very protective household, and there were certain things that we could do and we could not do. this was part of Pittsburgh I never knew. But when I came to New York, it was like a new world. And one of the first places that, well, not one of the first places, but eventually I did get to go to the Apollo. And that was a real eye opener. Traveling through New York City, coming out of the Holland Tunnel, there were hookers and women of the street. And this was all a new world for me and very fascinating. And of course, through the reading that I've done, there was a piece called Rage in Harlem. And I did a lot of sketches from that. And this one piece, The Honeys, was, I believe it was from Rage in Harlem and many others. So it's something that fascinated me. I don't know why. I guess it was the unknown, the unlived, the unexperienced. And I found it very exciting, very colorful.
Well, one would get the impression, I just love the eyes on these figures. One would get the impression that these are people in a nightclub watching a floor show, just because they're all facing in one direction. Although it's apparent that alcohol may have played a role in easing the inhibitions of some of the people in the audience.
And after a hard day's work, this was an outlet. This was the release. This was the joy that they found, that for a few short moments in their life, they could relax and have fun and feel warm, wanted, and loved. So
sure,
it's really kind of a love thing too.
Talk about that for a second.
Being a love thing.
Yeah.
Again, back to Pittsburgh. We are known for the jazz musicians that came out of Pittsburgh. And there was that life of nightclubs and dancing. And I don't remember really experiencing that until I was maybe a teenager. I know my brother said, you have to learn how to dance. When you go out, you have to learn how to dance. And I've had some miserable experiences with that. But jazz, I think, is part of my DNA. I took piano lessons for 8 years. My brother, my sister, all of us, we were always involved in music. The Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra was brought to the schools, and the children were taken to listen to music and listen to concerts and theaters. It was just so culturally diverse, and it's all a part of my experience growing up.
Well, there's music in all of these pictures of one sort or another. Here's more of the survival and release paintings. Can you talk about these? They're both fascinating and they're both different.
Well, the Jewel Box Review, that was one of my first experiences at the Apollo Theater. These were men dressed as women. And from what I understand, one person in this whole group was not a transvestite, and I guess it was something for people to figure out who it was, but it was just fascinating. It was a new experience for me, and I made sketches of it, and out of it came this painting. The other painting, The Foxes, I believe that was also a part of the Harlem Rage series that I did. It's interesting. I'm now seeing some of the pieces from the Harlem Rage in auctions, where the pieces are now being auctioned off.
Yeah, both paintings are fascinating. It's interesting. I lived for some years in Kansas City. And when I lived in Kansas City, although I never visited the place, there was a place called the Jewel Box Review, and it was it was a nightclub that specialized in drag queens and transvestites. The language, it's hard to pick a word that's politically correct. It changes, the language changes, but it was basically people who were born as men who performed as women in a kind of burlesque way. And the Foxes is reminiscent of an earlier time because it looks to be a burlesque presentation.
And as you mentioned, the title has changed. LGBT, LGBTQ. It's an area that I'm deeply interested in because equality, regardless of whether it's color, whether it's gender, is something that gives me great concern. And it's something that I want to understand, I want to not accept because that is not the right word, because I've already accepted it. It's just something that needs to be addressed.
Well, the notion of freedom should be that everyone is accepted without regard to the choices they make or the circumstances they acquire, whether by choice or not.
Very well put.
And so I think we all share, I share your view. And I think these paintings are a testimony to some of that. I did, before we leave, want to make one more comment. I noticed that the woman in the foreground in the Foxes appears to be wearing a fox. Is that right? Do I have that right?
You have that right.
You don't see that much anymore, but at the time, a fox was a symbol of success for a woman to wear a fox.
And believe it or not, I still have one that was handed down through one of my aunts. And every time I look at it, I kind of smile to myself.
That's great. All right, these are also survival and release paintings. Talk about these, please.
I've done a series of paintings on dreams, and it speaks, and I use birds because it speaks of getting deeper into the mind, things that are, as I mentioned before, genetic memory. It's just so powerful and so big and so undiscovered and unrealized. I don't think you could live a full life and having discovered so many things that are a part of your being, your ancestry. It's just vast. And I have dreams 1, dreams 2, dreams 3. Sometimes I use hummingbirds, sometimes I use owls, pigeons, doves. This is all a part of it. New Orleans Mardi Gras, it has a special meaning to me because my great-grandfather was a slave who was brought to Louisiana, and he brought with him his artistic talent and experience, and he was an ironsmith. And when you see some of those iron things in Louisiana, it makes me think of our background, our history. He later moved up to Appomattox, Virginia, where he had a little blacksmith shop and was there on the very day that the Civil War ended. It is said, and I don't know there's anything to back it up, that the surrender was signed on his blacksmith shop. And then later they had the final or the formal surrender in the courthouse. When I went to Appomattox a couple years ago, the blacksmith shop had been torn down. There was no sign, no mention of it at all. But I was glad to have had the opportunity to get back to the very place where he managed to travel. And of course, later on, the family dispersed and moved north. But I've been to Louisiana many times. The food is exceptional. The color, the culture, everything is, it's a part of our heritage, and a certain part of mine.
Indeed, I'm sure. I love this painting. The masks, you know, the notion that you would have a mask on a wire that you would hold up. We take on a different persona when we wear a mask sometimes, I think.
And certainly now with all the masks, you know, people are doing graphic designs and artists, all with people wearing masks. And I think this will go on for who knows when, until this virus is controlled. So it's contemporary in a sense.
Indeed it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Stephen Bennett of the Bennett Collection. My guest today is the wonderful painter, Pittsburgh native and painter Ann Tanksley. We're going to continue our discussion in part 3, but this concludes part 2, and we will be back with you. Thank you all.